Before the video gets started today, I would like to give a special shout out to my patrons: Bernadette Reeve, Jacob Clancy, Katze der Nacht, Coley Claudette, Crow at the SOL, Minister Elana C. Henderson, Antonio Contreras, Kahlest Enoch, Ghost Eagle 1991, Howard Rholetter, Brian S. Morrow, Mathew Bergman, John Parsons, Jen M., the Schmeister, and Brenda Welby. Thank you all so much, and if you'd like a special shout out, consider becoming one of my patrons. And now, let's get into it. Welcome back to another Serial Killer Saturday. Today we focus on a highly requested case of Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer, who confessed to more than 71 murders, though only convicted of 49. Gary Leon Ridgway, born in February of 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah, to Mary Rita Steinman and Thomas Newton Ridgway. He has two brothers, Gregory and Thomas. He was raised in the McMicken Heights neighborhood of SeaTac, Washington. Ridgway's home life was somewhat troubled. Relatives have described his mother as domineering and have said that young Ridgway witnessed more than one violent argument between his parents. As a boy, Ridgway had a habit of wetting the bed. His mother would often be the one to discover the accidents and would bathe him immediately. She would then belittle him and embarrass him in front of his family. From a young age, Ridgway had conflicting feelings of sexual attraction and anger toward her. As a young child, Ridgway was tested with an IQ of 82, signifying low intelligence, and his academic performance in school was so poor that at one point in high school he had to repeat a single school year twice in order to attain grades decent enough to pass. His classmates at Tyee High School describe him as congenial, but largely forgettable. His teenage years, however, were troubled. When he was 16, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy who survived the attack. He had led the boy into the woods and then stabbed him through the ribs into his liver. According to the victim and Ridgway himself, Ridgway walked away laughing, saying, "I always wondered what it would be like to kill." At age 18, while in high school, Ridgway joined the Navy. After graduation, he married his high school girlfriend, Claudia Barrows, and was sent to Vietnam, where he served on board a supply ship and saw combat. During his time in the military, Ridgway began spending a lot of time with prostitutes and contracted gonorrhea for the second time. This angered him, but he continued to have unprotected sex with prostitutes. Meanwhile, his wife Claudia, alone and 19 years old, began dating again, and the marriage quickly ended within a year. His first 2 marriages resulted in divorce because of infidelities by both partners. His second wife, Marcia Winslow, claimed that he had placed her in a chokehold. Ridgway had become fanatically religious during his second marriage, spreading the word of God door to door, reading the Bible aloud at work and at home, and insisting that Marcia follow the strict teachings of their church pastor. Ridgway would also frequently cry after sermons or reading the Bible. Though Ridgway continued to solicit the services of prostitutes during this marriage, and also wanted Marcia to participate in sex in public and in inappropriate places, sometimes even in areas where his victims' bodies had been discovered. According to Time magazine, Ridgway had an insatiable sexual appetite His 3 ex-wives and several old girlfriends reported that Ridgway demanded sex from them several times a day. Oftentimes, he would want to have sex in a public area or in the woods. Ridgway himself admitted to having a fixation with prostitutes, with whom he had a love-hate relationship. He frequently complained about their presence in his neighborhood, but he also took advantage of their services regularly. It's possible that Ridgway was torn between his uncontrollable lust and his staunch religious beliefs. In 1975, his second wife gave birth to his son, Mathew. Through the 1980s and 1990s, Ridgway is believed to have murdered at least 71 women, according to Ridgway in an interview with Sheriff Reichert in 2001, near Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. His court statements later reported that he had killed so many he lost count. A majority of the murders occurred between 1982 and 1984. The victims were believed to either be prostitutes or runaways picked up along the Pacific Highway South International Boulevard 99, whom he strangled. Most of their bodies were dumped in the wooded areas around the Green River, except for 2 confirmed and another 2 suspected victims found in the Portland, Oregon area. The bodies were often left in clusters, sometimes posed, usually nude. He also sometimes later would return to the victims' bodies and have intercourse with them. Because most of the bodies were not discovered until only the skeletal remained, 4 victims are still unidentified. Ridgway occasionally contaminated the dump sites with gum, cigarettes, and written materials belonging to others. And he even transported a few victims' remains across the state lines into Oregon to confuse the police. Ridgway began each murder by picking up a woman, usually a prostitute. He sometimes showed the woman a picture of his son to help her trust him. After having sex with her, Ridgway strangled her from behind. He initially strangled them manually. However, many victims inflicted wounds and bruises on his arms while trying to defend themselves. Concerned these wounds and bruises would draw attention, Ridgway began using ligatures to strangle his victims. Most victims were killed in his home, his truck, or a secluded area. In the early 1980s, the King County Sheriff's Office formed the Green River Task Force to investigate the murders. The most notable members of the task force were Robert Keppel and David Reichert, who periodically interviewed incarcerated serial killer Ted Bundy from 1984. Their interviews with Bundy were of little help in the Green River investigations, but elicited confessions from Bundy on unsolved cases. Also contributing was John E. Douglas, who has since written much on the subject of the Green River Killer. Ridgway was arrested in 1982 and 2001 on charges related to prostitution. He became a suspect in 1983 in the Green River killings. In 1984, Ridgway took and passed a polygraph test, and on April 7, 1987, police took hair and saliva samples from Ridgway. Around 1985, Ridgway began dating Judith Mawson, who became his 3rd wife in 1988. Mawson claimed in a 2010 television interview that when she moved into his house while they were dating, there was no carpet. Detectives later told her he probably wrapped a body in the carpet. In the same interview, she described how he would leave early for work in the morning some days, telling her it was for the overtime pay. Mawson speculated that he must have committed some of the murders while supposedly working these early morning shifts. She claimed that she had not suspected Ridgway's crimes before he was contacted by authorities in 1987, and in fact had not even heard of the Green River Killer before that time because she did not watch the news. Author Penny Moorhead says that when she interviewed Ridgway in prison, he said his urge to kill was reduced while he was in a relationship with Mawson, causing him to commit fewer murders than he otherwise would have. and that he truly loved her. Mawson told a local television reporter, "I feel like I've saved lives just by being his wife and making him happy." The samples collected in 1987 were later subjected to DNA analysis, providing the evidence for his arrest. On November 30th, 2001, Ridgway was at the Kenworth truck factory where he worked as a spray painter when police arrived to arrest him. Ridgway was arrested on suspicion of murder of 4 women nearly 20 years after first being identified as a potential suspect when DNA evidence conclusively linked semen left in the victims to the saliva swab taken by the police. Early in August of 2003, Seattle Television News reported that Ridgway had been moved from a maximum security cell at King County to an undisclosed location. Other news reports stated that his lawyers, led by Anthony Savage, were closing a plea deal bargain that would spare him the death penalty in return for his confession to a number of the Green River murders. On November 5th of 2003, Ridgway entered a guilty plea to 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder as part of a plea bargain agreed to in June that would spare him execution in exchange for his cooperation in locating the remains of his victims and providing other details. In his statement accompanying his guilty plea, Ridgway explained that all of his victims had been killed inside King County, and that he had transported and dumped the remains of 2 women near Portland to confuse the police. Deputy Prosecutor Jeffrey Baird noted in court that the deal contained the names of 41 victims who would not be the subject of State versus Ridgway if it were not for the plea agreement. He explained his decision to make the deal by saying, "We could have gone forward with the 7 counts, but that is all we could have ever hoped to solve. At the end of that trial, whatever the outcome, there would have been lingering doubts about the rest of these crimes. This agreement was the avenue to the truth, and in the end, the search for the truth is still why we have a criminal justice system. Gary Ridgway does not deserve our mercy. He does not deserve to live." The mercy provided by today's resolution is directed not at Ridgway, but toward the families who have suffered so much. On December 18, 2003, King County Superior Court Judge Richard Jones sentenced Ridgway to 48 life sentences, with no possibility of parole, and 1 life sentence to be served consecutively. He was also sentenced to an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence for each of the 48 victims, adding 480 years to his 48 life sentences. During his many confessions, Ridgway revealed that he talked to and tried to make his victims comfortable before he committed the murders. In his own words, he said, "I would talk to her, get her mind off the sex, anything she was nervous about, and think, she thinks I'm a nice guy who cares," which I didn't. I just want to get her in the vehicle and eventually kill her. Later in a statement, Ridgway said that murdering young women was his career. The following are direct quotes from Gary Ridgway as part of his confession and admission of guilt on Wednesday, November 5th, 2003. "I have killed so many women, I have a hard time keeping them straight. I killed them all in King County. I killed some of them outside. I remember leaving each woman's body in a place where she was found. The plan was I wanted to kill as many women as I thought were prostitutes as I possibly could. I picked prostitutes as my victims because I hate most prostitutes, and I didn't want to pay them for sex. I also picked prostitutes as victims because they were easy to pick up without being noticed. I knew they wouldn't be reported missing right away, and might never be reported missing. I picked prostitutes because I thought I could kill as many of them as I wanted without getting caught. Another part of my plan was where I put the bodies of these women. Most of the time I took the women's jewelry and their clothes to get rid of any evidence and make them harder to identify. I placed most of the bodies in groups which I called clusters. I did this because I wanted to keep track of all of the women I killed. I liked to drive by the clusters around the county and think about the women I placed there. I usually used a landmark to remember a cluster and the women I placed there. Sometimes, I killed and dumped a woman intending to start a new cluster and never returned because I thought I might get caught putting more women there. The following is a statement that Ridgway read in King County Superior Court. I'm sorry for killing all those young ladies. I have tried hard to remember as much as I could to help the detectives find and recover the ladies. I'm sorry for the scare I put in the community. I want to thank the police, prosecutors, my attorneys, and all others that had the patience to work with me and help me remember all the terrible things I did and to be able to talk about them. I know how horrible my acts were. I have tried for a long time to get these things out of my mind. I have tried for a long time to keep from killing any more ladies. I'm sorry that I've put my wife, my son, my brothers, and my family through this hell. I hope that they can find a way to forgive me. I'm very sorry for the ladies that were not found. May they rest in peace. They need a better place than what I gave them. I'm sorry for killing these young ladies. They had their whole life ahead of them. I am sorry I caused so much pain to so many families. Authorities suspect that there are many more victims buried within and outside of King County. It took many years to find the bodies that were part of this plea bargain, and it may take many more years to find the rest. They feel it's not really over yet. If you have a serial killer you would like to see featured here, email me at duchessdark676@gmail.com. See you next time.